Senator Ejercito is recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. As a result of the Bicameral Conference Committee on the Balanced Housing Act held last February 1, 2016, I have the honor to submit a copy of the Conference Committee report with a joint explanation on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2947 and House Bill number 4116, and consider this read into the record. I move, Mr. President, that we adopt and approve the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2947 and House Bill number 4116. I so move, Mr. President.
Senator Sponsenrili is recognized.
So that we can appreciate, Mr. President, what was done in the bicameral conference, may I request that we take time to read in chamber the disagreeing provisions that were taken up and the dispositions.
What is the pleasure of the gentleman? Senator Ejercito will spread into the record what the Bicameral Conference Committee report agreed upon on the disagreeing provisions of the two bills.
Mr. President, if you would allow me,
Please proceed.
I would read the explanation of the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions. The Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2947 and the House Bill number 4116, after having met and fully discussed the subject matter in the conference, hereby report to the respective houses the following. That, number one, the conferees agreed to use the Senate version as the working draft. On Section 2 on amendatory provisions, the House version was adopted as Section 2 in the reconciled version, and the same reads as follows. Section 3 of Republic Act number 7279 is hereby amended by redefining paragraph R to read as follows. Socialized housing refers to housing programs and projects covering houses and lots or home lots only, or residential condominium units undertaken by the government or the private sector for the underprivileged and homeless citizens, which shall include sites and services development, long-term financing, liberalized terms on interest payments, and such other benefits in accordance with the provisions of this Act. Number 3, still on Section 2, subparagraph B, both the Senate and House versions were adopted in the reconciled version and was rephrased to read as follows. Section 18 of Republic Act number 7279 is hereby amended to read as follows. Section 18, balanced housing development. The program shall include a system to be specified in the framework plan whereby owners and or developers of proposed subdivision and condominium projects shall be required to develop an area for socialized housing equivalent to at least 15% of the total subdivision area or total subdivision project cost, and at least 5% of condominium area or project cost at the option of the developer in accordance with the standards as provided by law, provided that the proposed socialized subdivision projects and proposed socialized condominium projects shall be exempt from this requirement. For this purpose, the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council and the National Economic and Development Authority shall jointly determine and set separate socialized housing price ceilings for socialized subdivision and socialized condominium projects, which shall be mandatorily reviewed or revised every 2 years. The balanced housing development, as herein required, may also be complied by the owners and or developers concerned in any of the following manner. Letter A, development of socialized housing in a new settlement. Letter B, joint venture projects for socialized housing with either the local government units or any of the following housing agencies, or with another private developer or with a non-governmental organization engaged in the provision of socialized housing and duly accredited by the Housing and Land Use Regulatory Board. But if the developer has failed to complete the development of the project, the owner and or developer of the main subdivision or condominium project shall be solidarily liable only to the extent of compliance to the balanced housing requirements, regardless of the provisions of their joint venture agreement. Letter C, participation in a new project under the Community Mortgage Program. The Housing and Land Use Regulatory Board is hereby mandated to submit to Congress an annual report on the compliance hereof by the owners and/or developers of subdivision and condominium projects. Any person violating any provision of this section shall be imposed a fine of not less than 500,000 pesos for the first offense, suspension of license to do business for a period of 3 to 6 months, and a fine of not less than 500,000 pesos for the second offense, and cancellation of license to do business for the third offense. Number 4, still on Section 2, subparagraph C, Senate version was adopted in the reconciled version and was rephrased to read as follows. Section 20 of Republic Act Number 7279 is hereby amended to read as follows. Section 20, incentives for private sector participating in socialized housing. To encourage greater private sector participation in socialized housing and further reduce the cost of housing units for the benefit of the underprivileged and homeless, the following incentives shall be extended to the private sector. Letter A, reduction and simplification of verification and accreditation requirements for participating private developers. Letter B, creation of one-stop offices in the different regions of the country for the processing, approval, and issuance of clearances, permits, and licenses, provided that clearances, permits, and licenses shall be issued within 90 days from the date of submission of all requirements by the participating private developers. Letter C, simplification of financing procedures. And letter D, exemption from the payment of the following. Number 1, project-related income taxes. Number 2, capital gains tax on raw lands used for the project. Number 3, value-added tax for the project contractor concerned. Number 4, transfer tax for both raw completed projects. And number 5, donor's tax for land certified by the local government units to have been donated for socialized housing purposes. Provided that a socialized housing certification issued by the Housing and Land Use Regulatory Board shall be sufficient for the purpose of availment of tax exemption. Provided further that upon application for exemption, a lien on the title of the land shall be annotated by the Register of Deeds. Provided furthermore that the socialized housing development plan has already been approved by the appropriate government agencies concerned. Provided finally that all the savings realized by virtue of this provision shall accrue in favor of the beneficiary, subject to the implementing guidelines to be issued by the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council. Number 5, Section 3 of the Senate version was adopted as Section 3 in the reconciled version. Still on Section 3, the word 60 were changed to 90. Sections 4, 5, and 6 of the Senate version were adopted as Sections 4, 5, and 6, respectively, in the reconciled version. And number 8, Section 6 of the House version was adopted as Section 7 in the reconciled version with some modification to read as follows. Section 7, Effectivity Clause. This act shall take effect 15 days after the completion of its publication in the Official Gazette or in a newspaper of general circulation. The title of the Senate version was adopted with some modifications to read as follows. An act strengthening the balanced housing development program, amended for the purpose, Republic Act Number 7279, as amended, otherwise known as the Urban Development and Housing Act of 1992. That's all, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I move to adopt the disagreeing provisions read into the record
The
of Senate Bill 2947 and House Bill number 4116.
Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2947 and House Bill 4116, together with its joint explanation read into the record by Senator Ejercito, is hereby adopted.
Mr. President, I move to consider the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 3023 and House Bill number 6395.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provision of Senate Bill 3023 and House Bill 6395 is in order.
Mr. President, I move to recognize Senator J.V. Ejercito, the sponsor.
Senator Ejercito is recognized to present the report to the chamber.
Good afternoon again, Mr. President. As a result of the Bicameral Conference Committee on Amendments on Foreign Restrictions held last February 2, 2016, I have the honor to submit a copy of the Conference Committee report with a joint explanation on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 3023 and House Bill number 6395. And with the permission of the body, Mr. President, I'd like to read
Please
That-
proceed.
the Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 3023 and House Bill number 6395, after having met and fully discussed the subject matter in a conference, hereby report to their respective houses the following. That, number one, the conferees agreed to use the Senate version as the working draft. Number two, on Section 1, Declaration of Policy, the first paragraph of the Senate version and the second paragraph of the House version were adopted. The second paragraph of the House version was amended to replace the word removing with amending. On Section 2A, 2C, and 2D, these were deleted. The heading of Section 2 was rephrased to definition of investment, and House version of the definition of investment was adopted. On Section 3, the whole section was deleted and replaced with Section 3, lifting of nationality requirements. The nationality requirements for adjustment companies as provided in the Presidential Decree number 612, investment houses as provided in the Presidential Decree number 129, lending companies as provided in Republic Act number 9474, and financing companies as provided in Republic Act number 8556 are hereby repealed subject to the provisions of this Act and the Constitution. Number 5, the Section 5 of the House version was adopted and renumbered as Section 4. Number 6, Section 7 of the House version was adopted and renumbered as Section 5. Number 7, Section 8 of the House version was adopted and renumbered as Section 6. The first proviso was amended in the phrase, and consistent with the objectives of this Act, was inserted after the word requirement. Number 8, Section 6 of the House version was adopted and renumbered as Section 7. Number 9, Section 9 of the House version was adopted and renumbered as Section 8. Number 10, Section 8 of the Senate version was adopted and renumbered as Section 9. The Section 9 of the Senate version was adopted and renumbered as Section 10. Number 12, the Section 10 of the Senate version was adopted and renumbered as Section 11. Number 13, the title of the House version was adopted and amended to read as follows. An act amending investment restrictions in specific laws governing adjustment companies, lending companies, financing companies, and investment houses cited in the foreign investment negative list and for other purposes. That's all, Mr. President. I move for its approval.
There is a motion that the chamber adopts the
Its
bicameral
adoption.
conference committee report on the disagreeing provision on Senate Bill 3023 and House Bill 6395 with the joint explanation being made of record. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 3023 and House Bill 6395 is adopted.
Mr. President, before we move to the reference of business, a number of matters. Firstly, we'd like to acknowledge Attorney Gil Pabilona, Head of Legal and Prosecution Service of the PDEA. He's in the plenary, Mr. President.
Attorney Gil Pabilona of PDEA is recognized.
We'd also like to acknowledge Vice Governor Bons Dolor of Mindoro, Mr. President.
Welcome to the Senate, Mr. Vice Governor.
Mr. President, the designated members, I would like to manifest that the designated members for the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House Bill number 5076, entitled An Act Creating the Philippine Trade Representative Office and Appropriating Funds Therefor, and Senate Bill number 2922, entitled An Act creating the Philippine Trade Representative Office and appropriating funds therefore are as follows. Senator Bamakino as the chairperson, Senator Sani Angara, and Senator J.V. Ejercito as members.
The Senate contingent to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number
2922,
2922 and House Bill number
5076.
5076 is hereby constituted.
Mr. President, a similar matter, I would like to manifest that the Senate panel for the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House Bill number 4730 and Senate Bill number 1618 are as follows. Senator Bamakino as chairperson, Senator Sani Angara, and Senator J.V. Ejercito as members.
And what is the subject matter?
This is the exact change bill, Mr. President.
Okay. Any objection? Hearing none, the Senate contingent to the Bicameral Conference Committee on Senate Bill 1618 and House Bill 4730 is hereby constituted as nominated.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
1 minute suspension. Ano?
Nancy, para. You're next. Yung centenary. Yeah, but I will call you. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I withdraw that motion.
Motion is withdrawn.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 449 under Committee Report number 54. This is the bill on Filipino centenarians, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
Mr. President, we are currently in the period of interpolation. Mr. President, we are currently in the period of individual amendments for this bill. I move that we recognize Senator Binay, the sponsor.
Senator Binay is recognized. Are there committee amendments, Senator Binay?
Mr. President, there are no more committee amendments nor individual amendments.
In that case, Mr. President, I move to close the period of individual amendments.
Period for amendments is hereby terminated.
I move to approve Senate Bill number 449 under Committee Report number 54, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill number 449 is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move to suspend Committee Report number 54.
So suspended.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of House Bill number 5576 under Committee Report number 445. This is the bill on Camiguin Tourism Development, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, we are currently in the period of individual amendments. I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Sani Angara.
Senator Sani Angara is recognized. With the permission of the chamber, we have a 1 minute suspension. Mr. Sani.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed. Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the parliamentary status that we closed the period of individual amendment yesterday. There are no other individual amendments, so if there are no objections, maybe can move to approve on second reading, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none. House Bill 5576 and the Committee Report 445 is approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader. Thank you.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of House Bill number 5576 under Committee Report number 445.
So suspended.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill number 3086 under Committee Report number 352. This is the bill on the Department of Human Settlement and Urban Development, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of this measure is that the period of interpellations was already terminated, and thus I move to open the period of committee amendments and to recognize the sponsor, Senator J.V. Ejercito.
Period for individual amendments is in order, and for this purpose, to receive individual amendments, if any, is the sponsor, Senator Ejercito, who's now recognized.
Committee amendments, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, committee amendments. Are there any committee amendments?
Yes, Mr. President, there are quite a number of committee amendments. If you may proceed.
Please proceed.
On page 2, lines 8 to 10, under section 3.
1 minute suspension. Well, sorry.
Pero yung binabayo, hindi ko.
Session is resumed. We wish to bring to the attention of the sponsor that under consideration is a substitute bill, Senate Bill number 3086. Under our rules, there can be no committee amendments, so the chair is suggesting that the amendments being proposed for the record are the individual amendments of Senator Ejercito, because technically, since this is a substitute bill, there can be no further committee amendments. So if without any objection on the part of the chamber, we terminate the period for committee amendments and now recognize Senator Ejercito on the period of individual amendments. Senator Ejercito may proceed on that basis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. On page 2, lines 8 to 10, under section 3, delete the whole definition of the word housing and replace it with the following: a multi-dimensional concept relating to the process of residing and the objects of dwelling whose main attributes are location, relative to access to livelihood, tenure arrangements, cost, and physical structure, as well as their environment. Housing is likewise a physical structure as well as a social structure, functioning at different spatial scales from homes, neighborhoods, communities, municipalities, cities, provinces, and regions. It is also a sector of the economy, an important category of land use in both urban and rural areas, especially in cities. It is an important factor in the overall dynamics of the urban system. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, line 12.
Before, the chair notes that this is quite extensive amendments. To make it, to be fair to our colleagues, can the Secretariat reproduce a copy of these proposed amendments, distribute it to our members so that they can follow the amendments being proposed? In the meantime, we have this Xerox and given to the members of the chamber. We suspend our session.